The true wealth of a nation is not contained in the stored up gold, but in the intellectual and physical strength of its people. So don't you all agree that it's quite important for us to study and have a basic understanding about the population composition of a country? Hello and welcome back to this course on Fundamentals of Human Geography. I am your host Abhilash Sundaram, and in this video we'll discuss population composition. Timestamping has been provided in the description box below. So let's get into it. To paint the picture in your mind as to why the study of population composition is important, let's look at the population pyramid of India, which tells us that we have a huge percentage of population in the working age group. So that means India needs to invest a lot of money in skill training of its youth to reap its demographic dividend. No idea what a demographic dividend is? Don't worry, we'll be covering that in this video. Another example is of Japan, which is quite the opposite. Again, by looking at the population pyramid, it is revealed that it has an aging population. So Japan has to invest a lot of money in social infrastructure like ramps at public spaces, or maybe special buses, healthcare facilities for elderlies, and pension schemes for income support, and many other places. Population of a country means the persons inhabiting a country. It includes citizens and also the persons temporarily residing in the country. For instance, a foreign exchange student studying at IIT Delhi. People of a country are diverse in many respects, especially in a country like India. So some of the common ways of studying population is with respect to age, sex, literacy rates, occupation, and life expectancy. So let's first discuss the sex composition of a place. Sex composition of a place can be easily measured through sex ratio. In India, sex ratio is calculated by dividing the total female population by total male population and multiplied by 1000. So sex ratio is amongst the most basic demographic parameters, and it tells us and it provides us with valuable information about the status of women in the country. From basic biology, we know that ideally the number of women and men in a country should be equal. However, in regions where gender discrimination is rampant, we see that sex ratio tends to be unfavorable towards men, and in such regions, practices of female feticide, female infanticide, domestic violence against women are prevalent. One of the reasons could be the lower socioeconomic status of women in these areas. For instance, Haryana has the lowest sex ratio in the country according to Census 2011. Can you tell me which state has the highest sex ratio in India? Interestingly, more women in the population also does not mean better status, because men could have migrated to other regions for employment opportunities. In general, if we look at the global sex ratio, we find that Asian countries like Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, China, they have low sex ratio for different reasons. For China, it was the one-child policy, and for Saudi Arabia, it is the influx of male migrants which has distorted the sex ratio. On the other hand, European countries have more females and males are in minority due to better status of women, and also due to wars like World War II, which were male selective in their casualties. For instance, Latvia has the highest sex ratio in the world with significantly more women than men. Can you tell me where Latvia is on the map and which is the nearest sea to Latvia and also its neighboring countries? Moving to the next topic, which is age structure. Age structure basically represents the number of people in different age groups. Here we look at three important age brackets. First is 0 to 15 years. Children fall in this category. They are still in the learning phase under the guardianship of their parents and are economically unproductive. Next is 15 to 59 years, which is the working population in India. By 15 years, your basic schooling is done and you can apply it for some government jobs and work till 60, which is the age of retirement in India. This is the part of the population which generates income, pays taxes, basically runs the economy, and even supports the non-working population, that is, children and elderlies. Lastly, people above 60 years of age are elderlies. They constitute the aging population as they are economically unproductive, so they are dependent on the working population. A greater percentage of population above 60 years of age represents an aging population, which requires more expenditure on healthcare facilities, infrastructure, pension schemes, etc. On the other hand, a higher working population would lead to a higher economic growth if conditions are right. This accelerated economic growth due to the higher working population than non-working population is called the demographic dividend. India is one of the youngest countries in the world with a median age of just 28 years. For comparison, it is 37 years in China and 49 years in Japan. And so to exploit this huge demographic dividend, Government of India has introduced many schemes like MG Narega, Skill India Mission, Startup India, etc. So before we move on to the next topic, I want you to keep in mind that age structure is not a static concept, but is dynamic and changes with respect to level of development and with time. To understand a country's situation and make accurate predictions requires not just knowing the total population size, but its internal characteristics such as age and gender distribution. And one of the ways demographers use to represent this internal distribution is through population pyramids. Here the data is divided by gender with males on left and females on right, and the age structure is represented on the y-axis. The shape of the population pyramid is a powerful predictor of future population trends. Let's see how. In our first case, Rwanda's population pyramid, as you can see, is triangular shaped with a wide base indicating high birth rates and small population bars in the higher age brackets like 65 to 69 or 70 to 74 indicating high death rates. Since most of the population being young, the population will grow rapidly in coming years. This type of population is typical for a less developed country in phase 1 of demographic transition. For demographic transition theory, refer to this video. For our next case, let's look at Canada's population pyramid. It is bell-shaped and tapered towards the top. Compared to the previous case of Rwanda, population bars are smaller at the bottom, indicating that birth rates have declined, and population bars are wider in the middle and top, indicating that death rates have also declined. Population would either slowly increase or stay constant. Finally, let's look at the population pyramid of Japan, which has a very narrow base, as you can see, and has a tapered top. Majority of its population is concentrated in the post-reproductive years, and the number of young people are relatively very low, meaning at current rate of population, the population will decline. Such population pyramids are typical of developed and industrial countries in the stage 3 of demographic transition theory. Just by looking at the shapes, you can tell if the population will expand or contract of a country in future. That is the beauty of studying a population pyramid of a country. Population distribution in rural and urban areas. See, rural and urban areas are different from each other in terms of occupational structure, social conditions, infrastructure, etc. Different countries have their own definitions of rural and urban areas, but in general, rural areas are those areas where people are engaged in primary activities, whereas in urban areas, people are engaged in non-primary activities. So the figure on your screen shows the rural-urban sex composition of a few countries. You'll realize that Canada and Finland are the exact opposite of Zimbabwe and Nepal. In Western countries like Canada and Finland, males outnumber females in rural areas, and females outnumber the males in urban areas, simply because females have migrated from rural to urban areas due to better job opportunities, and farming, which is highly mechanized, remains largely a male occupation. Whereas in countries like India, female participation in farming in rural areas is fairly high, and urban areas are male dominated due to reasons like shortage of housing and lack of security and various other reasons. Literacy is one of the most important indicators and tools for the socioeconomic development of any country, as it reveals the standard of living, the social status of females, availability of educational facilities, and even the government policies. Many studies have time and again proven that higher levels of literacy lead to higher income level and hence reduces poverty, better nutrition levels in population, lesser child mortality ratio, drastic reduction in crime rates in the country. So it's pretty clear that education not only empowers but also transforms an individual and also the nation. That is exactly why Government of India has taken many initiatives to increase the same, like the latest National Education Policy 2020, Samagra Shiksha Abhiyan, Midday Meal Scheme, etc. But how is literacy defined in India? Any person above 7 years of age who can read and write and can do a little bit of maths is considered a literate in India. According to CSO, literacy in India stands at 77.7%. Moving to the last topic for the video, which is occupational structure. This is another important indicator which gives us insights into the working population. Working population refers to the people in the age group of 15 to 59 years that are engaged in economic activities. Economic development creates various types of occupations in an economy. All these occupations can be broadly classified into three categories: primary, secondary, and tertiary. Primary sector includes agriculture and allied activities like animal husbandry, fisheries, forestries, and also mining. Secondary activities include manufacturing industries, textile industries, construction sector. Tertiary sector includes all the services which are intangible in nature like trade, transport, communication, IT, banking, and insurance. By looking at the proportion of population engaged in these sectors, level of economic development of any nation can be measured. Let's see how. So, development experience across the world tells us that in underdeveloped countries, majority of the population is still engaged in primary sectors. And as the countries develop, the population gradually shifts from the primary to secondary sector. And finally, in developed countries, majority of the working population is engaged in the tertiary sector. On that note, we complete the chapter. If you liked the video or have a question, let me know in the comment section below. That's all for today. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.